Welcome everyone. We are delighted to have you here today to participate in our webinar about conflict minerals and the latest compliance requirements. We shall discuss the key elements of complying with the latest conflict minerals requirements out of the Securities and Exchange Commission introducing Section 1502 of the Dodd-Frank Act. We will also discuss the implications of this regulation, the hardship companies have faced in implementing the conflict mineral programs, and the impact of the latest updates to the SEC conflict minerals rule. And we will also provide the actionable tips with respect to our Autogen CM software and advice on how to approach the conflict minerals compliance. A little bit housekeeping here. Everyone but speakers are muted at this time. This meeting is being recorded and we will be sharing the PPT after the session. There will be a survey at the end of this webinar. So please help us by filling up the survey so that we can improve ourselves in the further webinars. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to use the comment section at the webinar. And we will get back to you at the end of the webinar or we will follow up after the webinar. Let me introduce today's webinar speakers. Sri Vinakota, our Head Product Regulatory Compliance, and Rajiv, our Conflict Minerals Expert. Over to Sriram and Rajiv.
Thank you, Pavitra. Good morning, everyone. Today's webinar agenda is as follows. Overview of conflict minerals regulations and what's the difference between conflict minerals US regulation and the EU regulation. What are the various CMRT sections and what is the typical process followed to gather the conflict minerals process, conflict mineral declarations, as well as submitting the CMRT to your customers. And we will also talk about the latest conflict minerals requirements from the regulatory front as well as the customers front. We will give an overview about our software solution on the conflict minerals, and we will also try to give you a live demo and followed by a recap. Next. A small introduction about our company, APA Engineering. We are APA Engineering. We are ISO 9001 certified for the processes. For the information security practices, we are 27001 certified and we have TISAC stamp. As a company, we have 4 different verticals: engineering, sourcing, compliance, and the software cataloging. Next. Especially in compliance, we work with several customers providing software solutions as well as services, meeting different compliance requirements starting from conflict minerals, REACH, ROHS, PFAS, SCIP, material safety data sheets creation, IMDS data, and CAMDS, and multiple other regulations, including the carbon data management, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Next slide. Time for a quick poll. The first topic is overview about conflict mineral regulation. Just to give a quick overview about why this conflict minerals regulation was issued. There are minerals mined in the conditions of armed conflict and the human rights abuses. Some armed groups earn hundreds of millions of dollars every year by trading the conflict minerals. Some local people are forcefully pushed into the mining by armed groups to earn money. Some minerals are smuggled out of Congo or DRC region through the neighboring countries. The money earned from the sale of conflict minerals is used for personal profit and further violent causes. In order to reduce this armed conflict, while mining these minerals such as tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold, uh, the conflict minerals regulation was introduced. Overall, the objective of the conflict minerals regulation excuse me, is to encourage the ethical sourcing while safeguarding the human rights. Next slide. Excuse me. Sorry about it. So the US conflict minerals regulation is pretty old, almost 10 years old. On January 5th, 2010, the then President Obama passed the Dodd-Frank Consumer Protection Act, that is also called Section 1502 on the conflict minerals. The main target audience is the companies that are traded in the US stock exchange, and they have to report on the 3TG presence and reasonable country of origin. On August 22nd, 2012, Stock Exchange Commission has issued a final rule requiring all the issuers to disclose their use of conflict minerals. And because of this, all the filing companies have to provide the conflict minerals report disclosure as a part of specialized disclosure by 31st of May every year. Next. On the European Union conflict minerals regulation, this is directly applicable to the companies that import tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold minerals into the EU, no matter where they originate from. This is effective from 1st January 2021, a 2-year-old regulation. The EU has tasked a group of external experts to provide a list of conflict affected and high risk areas, and that list gets periodically updated, unlike the US conflict minerals regulation. The list, as of now, we call it as Kahara countries, and it is an indicative, and it will indicate the areas that are currently or could be affected by the conflict and other illegal activities. And it is also non-exhaustive. It need not be essentially to include all the areas in the world affected by the conflict where the companies have to comply with the regulation while operating in the conflict areas. So many people have the question on what is the difference between EU conflict minerals regulation and the US conflict mineral regulation. We just try to summarize here. The US regulation applies to the companies that are listed in the American stock market, but the EU regulation applies to the importers of the 3TGs regardless of the stock market presence. For the due diligence, both can use the OECD methodology to meet the regulatory requirements. For the US, a reasonable annual country of origin is needed in addition to the SEC filing. SEC companies need to submit an additional documentation called a Form ST, a specialized disclosure that contains the conflict minerals process, and a reasonable country of origin is required to be published annually, whereas EU needs a continuous monitoring and it doesn't need it to submit any document to the authority at the moment. For the US regulation, the governance is done by SEC audit, and some NGOs may review it, but in comparison, the EU is governed by the national regulator enforcement. For practical implementation, the CMRT template can be used by both. While the US regulation did not set out any differentiation between the upstream and the downstream companies, on the contrary, EU regulation sets out different rules for upstream and downstream companies. Upstream companies have to comply with the mandatory rules on the due diligence when they import, and this is the most risky part of, as this is the most risky part in the supply chain. The downstream companies can fall into two categories. Those importing metal stage products also have to meet the mandatory due diligence rules. Those operating beyond the metal stage do not have any obligations under the regulations, but they're expected to use reporting and other tools to make their due diligence more transparent, including for the large companies, those in the non-financial reporting directive too. If you are an article manufacturer in the European Union, legally there is no requirement for you to comply with the conflict minerals regulation. But however, your European customer can ask. It can be due to an ESG requirement, or it is a pure voluntary requirement. Next. In the next few slides, we will talk about the various CMRT sections and the typical process that is needed to be followed. CMRT has got broadly 5 different sections. The first section contains the company information. Here the company needs to add the company name, the first responsible contact details, most importantly, the company to enter the declaration scope, whether it is at a company level, product level, or user defined level, and effective date, which means which date this CMRT is effective. Second section contains declaration scope questions. There are 1 to 8 interlinked questions. So if you answer one question as yes, other questions, second question as no, logically it should work out. Otherwise, there is a chance of rejection from your customers. The third section contains company level questions. That there are 6 questions A to H that are required to be answered based on the company's conflict minerals policy. The fourth section contains a list of smelters that are present in your supply chain while sourcing the 3TG along with the mine details. The fifth section is the product list that needs to be entered only if the declaration scope is chosen as a product level, and the product list, the product needs to be entered here. Next. While the due diligence as per the OECD is an elaborative process, we try to compile it into 4 different steps. The step 1, the supply chain tracing. The company has to identify the list of products and the respective suppliers from where you suspect the 3TG may be present. This is called a scoping. Once if you do the scoping, in the historically all the companies were requesting all the suppliers for the 3TG. Instead, if you do a proper scoping, that can eliminate a lot of initial work, or a lot of efforts can be minimized. The step 2 is the supplier liaison or the engagement. Request your suppliers for the CMRT and give them a helping hand if they have any questions. The third step is the due diligence or the data quality assurance. Once you receive the CMRT from your suppliers, you will have to perform the due diligence as per the OECD guidelines and verify logically all the questions 1 to 8, A to H, and the smelters as well. We have made 150 checkpoints. If anybody is interested, we can share those 150 checkpoints with you. Step 4, reporting by consolidating the CMRTs. Once you receive the CMRTs and verify the due diligence, before you actually submit the response to your customers or prepare a Form ST to the SEC, you need to consolidate all the CMRTs and report the worst case scenarios. For example, worst case scenarios in this CMRT, for example, out of 100 of your suppliers, even if one supplier says they are procuring from the 3TG, from the DRC region, your response to the question number 3 must be S. The consolidation interpretation may vary from the US and the Europe. Next. Now we shall talk about the latest requirements on the conflict minerals. Recently, on 26th May 2023, the latest version 6.31 CMRT was issued. While it did not have any major changes, however, there are updates to the templates that includes minor corrections on the declaration, smelter tab, and smelter lookup. Similarly, the latest CMRT version is 1.2. It was released on 12th May 2023, and it contains corrections to some of the bugs and errors, and again updates to the smelter reference list and standard smelter. Overall, there are no major changes on the latest templates. We have also added a link to download the latest templates for a quick reference. Next, while the product level, these are the recent requirements from the customers. While the product level CMRT is most advisable, at least 2 years back, almost all the companies were accepting the company level CMRTs, which means less work to the supplier and one CMRT preparation is only one time CMRT preparation. And once the supplier prepares the company level CMRT, they can submit the same to all the customers. But at least from the last 2 years, several customers have started requesting for product level CMRT, which means a supplier is required to submit the CMRT pertaining to only the products that they sell it to a particular customer. There are increased requests that are observed in the last 2 to 3 years, especially from the US stock listed companies. So while the product level CMRT is useful, but it has got its own pros and cons. I wouldn't say it has advantages, but it comes with a lot of effort. The first advantage is it reduces a lot of unwanted smelters as the supplier submits smelters associated only pertaining to the products. It lowers the overall risk to the customer conflict under due diligence process. However, it increases the burden on the suppliers. Suppliers require mostly a software tool or a sophisticated process to segregate the suppliers associated with a customer products. A manual process is a kind of definitely a challenge, especially for the large suppliers. Segregating the supply chain as per the bill of materials is a kind of daunting task. For example, if you are a supplier and you have 30 customers, they're asking the product level CMRTs. That means virtually you are required to make 30 different CMRTs. So some customers have gone ahead one more step and asking multiple CMRTs from the from the supplier. So that means if your customer is purchasing paint from you and they're also purchasing bolts from you, they ask paint CMRT separately and bolt CMRT separately. So they are segregating the products and asking you to submit multiple CMRTs to a single customer itself. That increases further labor work. Overall, the customer expectations have increased due to several other initiatives such as ESG, German supply chain due diligence, or even the recent war as well as the US sanctions on certain countries. Next slide. So now we will understand how to make a product level CMRT. So there are two methods. Product level CMRT is a kind of challenge if you don't have the proper processes or software tools. Based on the APS experience, product level CMRTs can be done in two ways. For example, if the customer purchases 100 products from a supplier, let us see how a supplier can make the product level CMRT. In the first method, which is a kind of universal method, as a first step, the supplier is required to collect all the 100 bombs for the products. And the step 2, you consolidate all the 100 bombs and take the unique supplier names from the bombs. And step 3 is you get the CMRTs from all these 100 suppliers associated to 100 bombs and consolidate roll up only those CMRTs. For larger organizations, there may be further challenges because the bombs may be located in multiple ERPs and even for the same customer, the same product, the product can be shipped from different plants. So all these can be a challenges if we are using some manual methods. API has a software that can help you in preparing the product level CMRTs. The second method applies to the suppliers who have their IMDS data typically connected to the automotive industry. If you have the IMDS data, the process can be simple. In such cases, the first step is to identify the IMDS numbers for all the 100 products. Typically, IMDS data contains the supplier submitted child part data. As a second step, we can use certain software tools that are available in the market. API has a tool for it that can help you in consolidate all the 100 IMDS data and take the unique suppliers from the IMDS data. So that means it is a matter of a couple of minutes of job. Once you have the IMDS data, you can quickly pull out the supplier names associated to the 100 parts. And then the third step, you can consolidate the CMRTs. Even our software has that feature. So this is applicable for the automotive industry where they are using IMDS data. Next slide. Another biggest expectation from the customer is the clean smelters or low risk smelters. So apart from the product level CMRTs, while the product level CMRT can minimize the overall smelters that are associated, but it may not improve the smelter quality. To achieve the smelter quality, customers have started to do a deep analysis on the risk profile of the smelters based on the country as well as the state locations. Most of the customers are asking for an action plan if the supplier CMRT has smelters from high-risk countries. Previous slide, please. Now let us understand what are the high-risk countries. While the CMRT template has got two categories called covered countries and CARA countries. Practically, customers have added additional criteria on the high risk. We have listed the high risk country parameters. Pavitra, can you escape it? There is some window that has popped up. Thank you. The first criteria is non-compliant smelters, especially from the DRC and adjoining countries. Well, non-compliant smelter is a risk. If it is a high risk, if it is non-compliant and procured from the DRC, which we all know, and the customer will definitely follow up with you again on the action plan. And the smelters from the countries that have US sanctions. This is becoming a recent strict requirement from the US-based customers. One has to periodically check the US official sanctions list to see what applies to them. And the third one is CAHARA countries. This is a requirement from EU conflict minerals. So CAHARA countries means conflict affected high risk areas. This is being followed by the European companies. The list contains not only the DRC countries, but also many other countries along with the state names. For example, if the smelter is located in X state of a country, the risk is applicable to that particular state smelter only. I mean, for example, if the supplier sources the tin from Egypt country, the risk is limited to the Shamal Sinar state region, not to the entire Egypt region. And the fourth one is UFLPA area tight smelters. This is a conflict affected region in the China. This is under scrutiny by the US. And the Russian smelters, you all know, due to the war, the US has put multiple sanctions, and gold is one of the popular imports from the Russia. And if the smelter is from Russia, and your US customers will likely to ask additional questions to you. And OFAC sanctions, this is another criteria where it has sanctions on certain smelters like JSE. They're also from Russia. And another important one is high-risk countries from L2 from the RMAP paid membership. So RMI, if you go to the Responsible Minerals Initiative website, it provides the free resources to find out if the smelter has an RMAP certification or not actively. And this is a pretty limited data. If a company purchases a paid membership, they could get additional resources to get the risk compliance status of the smelters, whether, especially if the country falls under L2 category, they are of high risk. And if a customer has a paid membership, these L2 country smelters likely falls under scrutiny, and they might follow up with you. Next. Not only the product level CMRTs and high risk countries check, but also customers are doing a thorough audit of the CMRT and asking for a detailed action plan. Some customers have even started giving a scoring system for the CMRTs on the quality of the CMRTs that supplier submits. Ford is one such customer where they have started giving a scoring system as well. Checking the presence of the first one is checking the presence of 3TG or cobalt or mica via referring the IMDS data, full metal disclosure. This can be done using the for the question number 1 and 2. They will check if you answer yes for 3TG, they will check in IMDS data for the accuracy, and based on which they can come back in case if if there is a discrepancy. And similarly, checking for the conflict affected areas and the sanctioned countries in addition to the DRC countries, that is Q3 and Q4. And on the Q5, it asks a question called as a product contain 100% recycled resources of 3TG. If you answer yes for this and show the enough evidences, you are likely to get a better score because every company encourages recyclable resources. And the fourth question is, how much percentage of responses were received and how much were reported. This is on the 6th. So if you have 100 suppliers and you got 30 responses, you are likely to indicate 30% as your response rate. As a follow-up, your customer will come back to you and ask, hey, why only 30? Why not 100? So similarly, do you have the conflict minerals policy that is covered, and was it published in the web? It is covered under Q question A. And are you just collecting the CMRTs and pushing it to the customer, or are you also doing the due diligence, QF? So based on these parameters, a detailed scoring would be expected. Already some customers have started, and this will also have an impact on your overall supplier scoring as well. In some cases, the customers have done even the virtual audits where via Teams and asking you to open the supplier CMRT and show the evidences on the CMRT that you have submitted. These are definitely some of the challenges that we can expect in the near future. Already some of them have already started. Next slide. Now I request my colleague Raju to take the rest of the slides.
Many thanks, Sri. Good day to all. We are currently at Autogen CM, our complete responsible mineral solution on the webinar agenda. Next slide. This is the Autogen CM tools login page. Next slide. First, let's see the process flow for Autogen CM. The major modules are supplier communication, CMRT due diligence, and report consolidation. Once the supply CMRT is received, it is passed through 150 plus validation criteria. A single click is sufficient to generate the report. We require only the supplier related information from the customer needs. Next slide. Here is a screenshot of our validation criteria from code 1 to next slide. Code 150 plus. Next slide. The key characteristics of APA software include SaaS model, part level or company level CMRT, division wise reporting, instant due diligence, 150 plus customizable validation criteria, user friendly interface, effortless uploading for the supplier, and generate the consolidated CMRT with a single click. This is our Autogen CM process. Upload the supplier list, contact the supplier list, supplier uploads the CMRT via portal, or they send us the declaration. So as I said, it's from the consolidated backup file. It will be generating in the latest version once the CMRTs get updated by RMI. So company information Q1 to Q8 based on the backup report. QA to QH is an input to the tool, and smelter list and product list if a part limit CMRT is generated. So I'm signing off with this. I request Sriram to conclude. Sri, over to you.
Yeah, Pavitra, can you share your screen? As a recap, so CM reporting is almost becoming mandatory even in the Europe also. You might receive a CM request or conflict minerals request even though you are not an SEC filer, but your end customer or your customer or your end customer is an SEC filer. Product level CMRT is the way forward. You will be expected to receive product level CMRTs, and in addition to that, you may be requested to fill extended mineral template that is for the cobalt and mica. Other minerals are also being added to that, and work with your suppliers on the plan B in case if you have high risk smelters that are found in their CMRT template. And please do not take it light and perform a stricter CMRT due diligence, because that can affect your scoring system if you don't do properly and include all those smelters whatever you have whatever they have submitted. If you include in your customer CMRT, then it might affect your supplier scoring. And please don't just roll up the CMRTs and send it to your customers. They will come with multiple questions. Not only 3TG report, but also other minerals reports are also were requested in order to perform with a better accuracy and the daunting task like product level CMRTs. A software solution can definitely help you and identify the risks and mitigate them, help in mitigating them. We have such software. Social governance, IMDA's advanced interface, reach ROH's Prop 65, recyclability calculations for the automated skip dossiers, and volatile organic chemicals compliance management. Next. A survey shall be initiated before closing the webinar window. Please kindly fill us to help us improve. Next. Unfortunately, we could not take up the questions because of the lack of time. We request you to post the questions to our mail ID, compliance@apengineering.com. We'll be happy to answer. This webinar deck will be posted to all the participants. And in case of any questions, please reach out to us. Thank you for listening to us. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.